It's 1967, a hot summer afternoon in Detroit, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer above the asphalt. Inside the Chrysler plant, the assembly line is loud, chaotic, alive. Steel blocks move down the line like clockwork. Workers don't stop. They can't stop. Sweat drips, machines roar, sparks fly. Chrysler is under pressure, big pressure, because out there, beyond the factory walls, a horsepower war is raging. Ford has its 289 and 302. Chevy has the 327 and the screaming 350. Pontiac is pushing the 400. Oldsmobile has the Rocket V8. Everyone is chasing more power, more speed, more glory. Magazine covers are filled with muscle cars. Drag strips are packed every weekend. America is obsessed with cubic inches and quarter-mile times. But tucked quietly into Chrysler's lineup is an engine nobody is really talking about. Just 318 cubic inches. Not flashy, not loud, not a race winner. It doesn't show up on magazine covers. It doesn't get mentioned in bar arguments about which engine is king. It just exists. And yet, this engine would go on to outlive almost all of them. But what almost nobody knows is the Mopar 318 wasn't supposed to be legendary. It was supposed to be ordinary. Just another engine. Just another option on the order sheet. Something for the buyer who didn't need the biggest motor. Something practical. So how did something so average become one of the most durable, long-lasting engines ever built? To understand that, you have to go back before the muscle car madness even began. Because the story of the 318 starts in a completely different world. Back in the mid-1950s, Chrysler was in trouble. Real trouble. Their engines were outdated, heavy, inefficient. The flathead designs that had served them for decades were falling behind. Competitors were moving fast, and Chrysler needed something new, something modern, something that could carry them into the future. So they built the A-Series small block V8. It was a clean sheet design. Engineers worked long hours. They studied what worked. They studied what failed. And they built something meant to last. The first version of the 318 arrived in 1957. It had a bore of 3.91 inches and a stroke of 3.31 inches. That gave it a displacement of exactly 318 cubic inches. Compression ratios hovered around 8.51, making it safe for regular fuel. No need for expensive premium gasoline. Just fill it up and go. Power? Around 230 horsepower in early versions. Torque sat near 340 lb-ft. Not bad, but not revolutionary, and that was the point. This engine wasn't designed to dominate racetracks. It wasn't built to set records at Bonneville. It wasn't meant to make headlines. It was designed to survive. Thick cylinder walls, a heavy cast iron block, conservative internals, modest compression. Everything about it screamed durability over performance. Every engineering decision was made with one question in mind. Will this last? But there was a problem. It was too heavy. The early polyhead 318 had these unusual semi-hemispherical combustion chambers. They worked, but they added complexity and weight. The heads were bulky. Manufacturing was more expensive. And in an industry where every pound matters, that was a problem. Chrysler engineers knew they needed something simpler. Something more efficient, something that could be produced faster, cheaper, and still deliver the reliability they had built into the original design. So in 1967, they made a bold move. They redesigned the engine completely. Same displacement, same basic dimensions. But now, it became part of the LA small block family. The LA stood for Light A Series, and it lived up to its name. Lighter, simpler, stronger in all the right ways. The new 318 LA kept the same bore and stroke, 3.91 by 331 inches, but switched to wedge-shaped combustion chambers. These were easier to manufacture, more efficient to produce, and they worked beautifully with the emissions equipment that was starting to appear. Compression ratios stayed modest, around 9.2.1 depending on the year. Nothing extreme. Nothing that would stress the internals. Horsepower? Around 230 to 250 in early LA versions. Later emissions-era models dropped closer to 150, 170 HP. But here's the thing, that wasn't a weakness, it was a strategy. Because while everyone else was pushing engines to the edge, high compression, aggressive cams, massive carburetors, wild valve timing, the 318 stayed calm. It didn't chase glory, it chased longevity, and that's where things get interesting. By the late 1960s, the muscle car era was exploding. Every manufacturer wanted bragging rights. Big blocks like the 440 and 426 HEMI were stealing headlines. Quarter-mile times were dropping into the 13s, even the 12s. Young buyers were walking into dealerships demanding the biggest, baddest engines available. The streets were alive with rumbling exhausts and tire smoke, but those engines had a dirty secret. They didn't last. High compression ratios, often 10.5.1 or higher, meant more stress, more heat, more wear. Engines would blow head gaskets after a few hard runs. Bearings would fail under the constant pounding. Oil would break down under extreme RPM. Cooling systems struggled to keep temperatures in check. Mechanics saw it all the time: burnt valves, warped heads, spun bearings, cracked blocks, engines that looked perfect on the outside but were destroyed on the inside. One Chrysler mechanic reportedly said, "We'd rebuild a Ford 40 every season, sometimes twice, but the 318, those things just kept running. We'd check them expecting problems and find nothing wrong." Another mechanic from a Dodge dealership in Ohio remembered, customers would bring in their 318-powered trucks with 150,000 miles. We'd do a compression test expecting bad news, and every cylinder would read perfect. It was almost boring. And that's when people started noticing. Because while the high-performance engines were winning races, the 318 was winning something else. Time. It was winning years, decades, generations. But there was a problem. The world was about to change. In 1970, everything started to collapse. The Clean Air Act hit hard. Emissions regulations tightened overnight. The government demanded cleaner exhaust. Compression ratios dropped across the industry. Horsepower numbers plummeted. Engines that had made 400 horsepower suddenly struggled to produce 250. At the same time, insurance companies began punishing muscle car owners. Actuaries looked at accident data and saw young men in high-powered cars getting into crashes. Premiums skyrocketed. A 20-year-old trying to insure a HEMI Cuda might pay more for insurance than the car itself. Then came 1973, the oil crisis. Gas prices surged. Lines formed at gas stations. Suddenly, fuel economy mattered. Suddenly, nobody wanted a thirsty, high-compression V8 that got 8 miles per gallon. And all those powerful engines, they became liabilities. The 440s sat on dealer lots. The HEMIs became too expensive to insure. The muscle car era was dying. But the 318, it didn't need to change much. Lower compression? It already had it. The engine had been running modest compression ratios since the beginning. Better fuel economy? It was already more efficient than its big block brothers. A 318 could deliver respectable mileage without trying. Reliability? That was its entire identity. That was what it was built for from day one. So while other engines faded away, the 318 adapted. It didn't fight the new regulations. It absorbed them, and then came the real test. The 1970s and 1980s were brutal for American cars. Truly brutal. Emissions equipment strangled engines. Catalytic converters restricted exhaust flow. Air pumps added complexity. EGR valves created problems. Power outputs dropped to embarrassing levels. Car magazines stopped testing acceleration times. They were too depressing. By the mid-1970s, the 318 was making as little as 150 horsepower. Some years even less. That's barely more than a modern compact car. That's less than a Toyota Camry makes today. But here's the crazy part. It didn't matter, because the engine still worked. It still started every morning. It still ran all day. It still refused to quit. Fleet vehicles started using it. Police cars that had to run 24 hours a day. Pickup trucks hauling equipment across job sites. vans carrying workers and tools, taxicabs logging thousands of miles every month, daily drivers that needed to get people to work without drama. These weren't enthusiasts who babied their cars. These were working vehicles driven hard by people who didn't care about engines, people who just needed transportation, and the 318 delivered. There are stories, real stories, documented stories, of these engines running over 200,000 miles without major rebuilds, just oil changes, just basic maintenance, just showing up and doing the job. Some even pushed past 300,000 miles. A few legendary examples crossed 400,000. One fleet manager from a utility company reportedly said, "We stopped tracking mileage on the 318s. There was no point. They just wouldn't die. We'd retire the trucks because the bodies rusted out, and the engines would still be running perfect." Another fleet operator from Texas remembered, "We had a service van with 340,000 miles on the original 318, never opened the engine, changed the oil, changed the filters, and it just kept going. When we finally sold it, the new owner put another 50,000 on it." But why? What made this engine so durable when others fell apart? The answer is in the details. The 318 used a relatively short stroke of 3.31 inches. That might sound like just a number, but it matters enormously. A shorter stroke means the pistons don't travel as far with each revolution. That reduces piston speed at high RPM. Lower piston speed means less stress on the crankshaft, the connecting rods, the wrist pins, the bearings. Everything lasts longer because nothing is being pushed to its limit. The bore size, 3.91 inches, was conservative compared to other engines of similar displacement. That meant thicker cylinder walls. Thicker walls resist warping. They resist cracking. They maintain their shape even under thermal stress. When the engine heats up and cools down thousands of times, those thick walls hold strong. The bottom end was massively overbuilt for its power output. This is the key. This is what separates the 318 from so many other engines. The crankshaft was heavy and strong. The main bearing caps were thick. The crankshaft journals were robust. The connecting rods were substantial. Nothing was pushed to its limit. Nothing was operating at the edge of its design parameters. Everything had margin. Everything had reserve. Even the oiling system was simple and effective. Oil flowed reliably to critical components without the complex high RPM demands of racing engines. The oil pump didn't need to deliver massive volume at 8,000 RPM. It just needed to keep things lubricated at normal operating speeds. And it did that perfectly. Because the engine wasn't constantly stressed, parts lasted longer. It's like running a marathon at a jogging pace instead of sprinting the whole way. A racing engine is like an athlete pushing maximum effort. Impressive, but exhausting. Eventually something breaks. The 318 was like a steady worker, showing up every day, doing the job, never complaining, never burning out. But there was another factor most people don't realize: maintenance tolerance. The 318 didn't need perfect care. Miss an oil change? It would forgive you. The generous tolerances and robust construction meant that slightly dirty oil wouldn't immediately cause damage. Use lower quality fuel? It didn't care. The modest compression ratio meant it wasn't sensitive to octane levels. Run it hard, cold, hot, in dust, in humidity, in freezing winters, in brutal summers. It just kept going. Forget to change the coolant for a few years. The 318 would grumble but survive. That kind of resilience made it perfect for real-world use. Perfect for owners who weren't mechanics. Perfect for people who just needed their vehicle to work. But the story doesn't end there. Because while the 318 was known for durability, it had a hidden side, a secret that performance enthusiasts discovered. With the right modifications, it could wake up. The same overbuilt bottom end that made it so durable also made it capable of handling more power. Performance enthusiasts discovered that swapping the intake manifold, adding a 4-barrel carburetor, upgrading the camshaft to something more aggressive, and improving exhaust flow could push the 318 well beyond its stock numbers. The heads could be ported. The compression could be bumped slightly. Headers could replace the restrictive factory manifolds. Some builds reached 300 horsepower. Others pushed to 350. A few ambitious builders went even further. And the best part? The bottom end could handle it because it had been overbuilt from the start, because it had margin, because it was never operating at its limit in stock form. Enthusiasts called it the little engine that could. But Chrysler wasn't focused on turning the 318 into a race engine. They had other options for that. The 340, the 360. Those engines shared the LA small block architecture, but were designed with performance in mind. They got the headlines, they got the magazine coverage, they got the respect of the muscle car crowd. And the 318, it stayed in the background. Quiet, reliable, unstoppable. The engine that nobody bragged about, but everybody secretly trusted. But then, the 1990s arrived, and everything changed again. By this time, fuel injection was taking over. Carburetors were disappearing from new vehicles. Engine design was evolving rapidly. Computer controls were becoming standard. The old ways were fading. Many expected the 318 to finally retire. But Chrysler had other plans. They introduced the Magnum version of the 318. Same basic architecture, same 3.91-inch bore and 3.31-inch stroke, same proven bottom end, same fundamental design philosophy, but now with modern upgrades. Better cylinder heads with improved port design, better airflow characteristics, multi-port fuel injection instead of carburetors, roller camshafts that reduced friction, improved ignition systems, horsepower climbed back up to around 230 HP. Torque reached about 300 lb-ft. Suddenly, the old 318 felt new again. It had power that rivaled its 1960s versions, but now with better fuel economy, better emissions, better drivability. It powered trucks like the Dodge Ram, SUVs like the Durango, vans like the Grand Cherokee, and once again, it proved itself. Reliable, consistent, durable. Owners reported the same stories. High mileage with minimal problems. Vehicles that just kept running. Engines that refused to quit. Even as newer engines entered the market, the 318 held its ground. But nothing lasts forever. By the early 2000s, Chrysler began phasing it out. Newer engines like the 4.7L PowerTech and later the modern HEMI family took over. These new engines had overhead cams, variable valve timing, computer-controlled everything. They were more powerful, more efficient, more modern. Production of the 318 finally ended in 2002. After more than 4 decades, think about that. From 1957 to 2002, 45 years. Few engines in history have lasted that long. Few designs have proven themselves across so many different eras, so many different challenges, so many different demands. And even fewer have done it with such a reputation, because the 318 didn't just survive, it outlasted. It outlasted the high-compression monsters of the muscle car era, engines that were faster, but fragile. It outlasted emissions crackdowns that killed so many others. It outlasted oil crises that changed what America wanted from its vehicles. It outlasted disco. It outlasted Reagan. It outlasted the Cold War. It even outlasted entire generations of vehicles. And today, it still hasn't disappeared. You'll find them in old trucks still working on farms. Classic Mopars lovingly restored in garages. Project cars waiting for their moment. Work vehicles that have been passed down through families, still running, still working, still refusing to die. Mechanics still know them, still respect them, still smile when one rolls into the shop. Another 318, they'll say. Good engine. So what made the Mopar 318 so special? It wasn't the fastest. It wasn't the most powerful. It didn't win big races or dominate headlines. It didn't make the cover of Hot Rod magazine. It didn't have a cool nickname that enthusiasts repeated in reverent tones. But it was engineered with a different philosophy. Don't push limits. Don't chase numbers. Don't sacrifice tomorrow for glory today. Build something that lasts. And that decision, made quietly in engineering offices decades ago, changed everything. because in a world obsessed with performance, the 318 proved that durability can be just as legendary. That sometimes, the quiet engine in the background is the one that wins in the end. That sometimes, boring is beautiful. And that's why, decades later, people still talk about it, not as the most exciting engine ever built, but as one of the toughest, one of the most reliable, one of the last engines that truly refused to die. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments what engine you want to see next. Another hidden legend, a forgotten powerhouse, or a rivalry that changed everything. And make sure to subscribe, because the next story might be even crazier.